Hi, this is Dr. Dave, and in this video I want to show you how you can solve a system of equations by carrying out the row operations in Google Sheets. What you're going to produce is a worksheet like the one you see here. You're going to have a system of equations which you have created from 3 of your stocks. Now remember, each one of you should be using a different triple of stocks. And for my case, I'm going to be working with the set of equations that you see right here. What we're going to do is take that system of equations, write it as an augmented matrix, which you see right here, and then we'll use Google Sheets to help us figure out how to put zeros down here, like you see here, and then all the corresponding numbers. And then we'll come down and put a 1 in the second column, second row. Then we'll put zeros in the rest of that column. Once that's done, what I see right here is the solution to my system. Now, to make sure it actually works, I'm going to go ahead and plug in x1, x2, and x3 here into my equation and make sure that it actually does come out to be $50,000 and that the dividend does come out to be $1,500 and that my average weighted beta does come out to be 1. Of course, your numbers are going to be a little bit different because you've got a different system of equations. So let's go ahead and create this. And to do that, I'm going to need to start a new worksheet. So I'll go down to the plus here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And the first thing I'm going to do is in A1, A2, and A3, I'm going to type in my equations. x1 plus x2 plus x3 equals 50,000. Now that looks pretty good. So next thing I need to do is to put the augmented matrix down below. So I'm going to go down to A5, and the coefficients in my first equation are 1. I'm going to press the right arrow, 1, right arrow, 1. And then what's on the other side of the equation is 50,000. Enter. Now I need to put in the coefficients of the second equation and the third equation, and then I can start doing my row operations. And now my last entry, 50,000. All right, so there's my original augmented matrix. Now, when I go down to my first set of row operations, I'm going to want to make sure that there's a 1 in the first entry, first column, and there is, so I don't need to do anything there. But now I need to use row operations to put zeros in the rest of that column. Remember that my first row is not going to change. So to make sure that doesn't change, I'm going to go ahead and click on A5. I'm going to drag my mouse over while holding the button, right click, and say copy. I'll go down to my new matrix, and this is very important. I'm going to right click, but instead of saying paste, I'm going to do paste special and tell it to paste values only. So that takes the values that are up here, paste it down below. Now I need to think about exactly what it is I have to do to put the 0 here. So I'm going to take negative 0.0116 times row 1, add it to row 2, and put the result in row 2. So negative 0.0116 times row 1, add it to row 2, and put the result in row 2. In this same step, I'm going to go ahead and put the 0 in the rest of the column. So it's going to be negative 0.7 row 1 plus row 3, put the result in row 3. Now I just have to make my matrix here reflect those steps. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a calculation. I'm going to type equals in A10, negative 0.0116 times, And remember, I'm multiplying it times row 1, so I'm going to click on the entry in the previous matrix. I'm going to type plus, and I'm going to add that to row 2. Press enter, and indeed it did become 0. Now, what is so powerful about Google Sheets is now I can click on A10, grab my fill bar, and just move that over. And now it does that same calculation for the rest of the entries in that row. So let's try it again, but now let's work on the new third row. So I need to take equals negative 0.7 times the row 1 from the previous matrix, and I'm going to add it to row 3. Press enter. There's the 0 like I want to see. So now I'll click on that entry, grab its fill bar, and drag it over. So now I've put the 1 and the zeros. That's the first set of steps when you're trying to put something into reduced row echelon form. All right, now in my next step, I need to put a 1 in the second row, second column. And I'm going to do that by dividing by 0.0329 or multiplying by the reciprocal of 0.0329. So before I do that, I'm going to take the two rows that are not going to change, which is the first row. I'm going to drag select it, say copy, and then go down to the new matrix and tell it to paste special the values only. I want to do the same thing with the third row. Drag select it, right click, copy, and now go down to the new matrix and tell it to paste values only. Now all I need to do is put in that new row, and like I just said, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of 0.0329, so that's times row 2, and put the result in row 2. Now I just need to have that happen. So I'll go into the first column of row 2, type equals 1 divided by, type equals 1 divided by 0.0329 times the entry in row 2, and then press enter. Now, it didn't do anything because multiplying times 0 gives 0, but when I stretch it over, let's see what happens. Boom, there's the one that I wanted right there. So now all I need to do is put zeros in the rest of this row. Now, as you go through and do these row operations, and I'll continue to do them, I kind of like to color code things a little bit. So for instance, I modified this second row up here. I could go up and drag select that row and then go up and change the font color to say red. I could do the same thing for the other one I changed here and change that one to a different color like blue. What this helps me to do is it helps me to see the row operation and see where I made the change. So down here, I might go ahead and click this second row and drag select it and say, I changed that, I'm going to put it in red. If I continue doing this all the way throughout, it helps me to kind of keep track of where I'm making my changes. Now, in the next matrix, I need to go ahead and use the second row to put zeros above and below it in the second column. So this means that the second row is not going to change. So I'm going to go ahead and drag select it, right click, say copy, and now go down to my new matrix, right click, paste values only. By doing paste values only, we only get the numbers in here. Sometimes we've used some formulas to compute things, and if we don't paste values only, these cells will not be referring back to the proper cells to compute this. All right, so let's think about this. To put a 0 in row 1, I need to take -1 times row 2, add that to row 1, and put the result in row 1. to do the same thing down below, to put the 0 right here, I'm going to need to take negative 0.81 times row 2 added to row 3, put the result in row 3. One of the nice things that we see here is as long as the numbers that we're working with here are fairly nice, I can just type them in when I do the formulas. But eventually what I'm going to find is I'm going to get long, nasty decimals, and I'm going to have to refer to the numbers not by the number itself, but by its location. That way I can avoid rounding. So let's go ahead and put that 0 above. So I'm going to go to the first row. I'm going to type equals negative 1 times row 2 from the previous matrix, and I'm going to add it to row 1. Press enter, and I'm just basically adding 0 to 1, but now I can go ahead and drag this thing over, and you'll see the entry that I wanted to be 0 is indeed 0. Now let's go down to the third row. Remember there, we're going to type equals negative 0.81 times. Now I'm multiplying it times the second row, and I'm going to add it to the third row. Enter. Now I'm going to drag it over, and there's the 0 that I was looking to make. So I've got my 1, 0, 0, my 0, 1, 0. In the next step, I'm going to go ahead and make a 1 down here. Now, in making that 1, I'm not going to change the first 2 rows. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on A17. And while I'm holding the mouse button down, I'm going to drag over. And then I'm going to say copy. Right click, paste special, paste values only. And now I just need to figure out that last part. But of course, I also want to do my color coding. I never want to forget my coloring. So I'll make it red, and I'm going to make this row operation that I did, I'm going to put that one in blue. All right, we're doing pretty good. So let's go ahead now and put the 1 into the third row, third column of the matrix. And the way I'm going to have to do that is I'm going to have to multiply by the reciprocal of this number. So it's going to end up being 1 divided by that number, so negative 0.674 984 8024. And that's times row 3. Put the result into row 3. Now, even if I were to type that entire number in here, there's still probably some rounding going on. So instead of trying to type the rounded number in to calculate this, I'm actually going to refer back to this cell value here using what's called an absolute reference. So to calculate this new third row, I'm going to type equals 1 divided by, and now the number I want to work with is in C19. To refer to that cell exactly, I'm going to type $C $19. And what that's going to do is always use that number for calculating out the entire row. So now times the third row in the previous matrix. Enter. Now I'll go ahead and grab that, stretch it over, and if I've done things correctly, that's going to be exactly 1 with absolutely no rounding. So let me scroll down here a little bit so we can continue, because we need one more matrix here, because we've got the value for x3 right here, but to get x2 and x1, we need to put zeros up above. So the first thing I'm going to note is I don't want to make any changes to this row. So I'm going to right click, say copy, and in my new matrix, I'm going to right click and say paste special, paste the values only. And now I'll figure out how to put those zeros in. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to take negative 0.401215 8055, and I'm going to multiply that times row 3, I'm going to add it to row 2 and put the result in row 2. To figure out the first row here, I'm going to have to take negative 0.5987 8419 45. You can see it's kind of difficult to always be going ahead and typing those numbers in. That's why it's nice to use that absolute reference. All right, so now let's go ahead and make that happen. So I'm going to go ahead and type equals. I'm going to take a negative sign. And now what I want to work with is this number right here, which is in C22. So I'm going to say $C, $22 times, so it's going to be times the row 3, and then I'm going to add that to row 2. If I've done this correctly, when I drag this thing over, I'm going to see a 0 where I wanted to see a 0 there. Now let's do the same thing for that first row. So that's going to be equals. Now I need to take the opposite of the number that's in C21. So I'm going to say negative $C21. So $21 times the entry in row 3. And then I'm going to add that to the entry in row 1. And now let's see if I've done it correctly by stretching it over. Yep, there's my 0 just like I wanted. So now this is in reduced row echelon form, and now I can go ahead and check to make sure that this is actually correct. So to do that, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. And I'm going to go up to the very top. I'm also going to make sure I've done my color coding here. So everything looks very nice. And it really doesn't matter which one's red and which one's blue. You just want to use different colors in here to distinguish things. And so now up here, I'm going to type target investment. Below it, I'm going to type target dividend. And then down below, target beta. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these values into the equation I have up here and make sure that it actually comes out to 50,000. So to do that, I'll start by typing in equals. And all I need to do is add the 3 solutions down here together. So I'm going to click on the entry that is the solution right there, plus the entry below that's the solution, plus the third one. Press enter, and it does come out to be 50,000. So I've invested $50,000. For the next one, I'm going to have to take those 3 numbers and multiply them by the corresponding dividends. So I'll start out with an equals 0.0116 times the first one, plus 0.0445 times the second one, plus 0.0248 times the third one. And when I do that, I see it gives 1,500 just like it was supposed to. Now on the beta, that's a little different because remember, we're talking about the beta is not actually this equation right here. This was something we modified a little bit, but remember how to get the beta is that we have to multiply the beta times the investment amounts and then divide by the total investment. So I'm going to type equals parentheses 0.7 times the investment amount plus 1.51 times the investment amount plus 0.35 times the investment amount. I'm going to end my parentheses and then divide that by the total investment. And remember, that was up here in 50,000. So I'll just click on that, press enter, and it comes out that my target beta here was 1 for this problem. So I know for a fact that I have exactly what I wanted in this portfolio: a target investment of $50,000, target dividend of $1,500, and a target beta of 1.